we're just going to discuss about probably most attractive, at the same time most ambitious variation by white, but also the one that involves the biggest risk by white. It goes with f3. F3 is surely weakening of the pawn structure and the dark squares around the white's king. So after f3, we should be going back with the bishop on f5. And now this position can divide into three positions. They can play c4, which is the main move, like we kick away that bishop with a tempi, and now I just want to defend the pawn and remain the pawn up. Then there is a line with bishop e5 early variation that is considered to be good in practice by white. Tivyakov plays that. And there is also a line with g4, bishop g6, and c4, which is kind of a very, very risky and also a pawn weakening approach by white, but also its computer approach, and computers always treat this gambit in this fashion, and they have like good results. Of course, whenever you play against computers, you're gonna have better results against them. Anyways, after f3, bishop f5, let's get started with bishop b5. So you play knight bd7. You play knight bd7, and right now we just threaten to get a pawn on d5 and to get a pawn back. So when they play c4, we can stop here for a moment, just to be able to remember what's one of the most typical ways of breaking the pawn structure in the pawn center that stands like this. It looks very solid for white, but we break it with e6. It opens up this bishop, but more importantly, it breaks the white center. After d takes e6, bishop takes e6. Right now we threaten c6 to kick this bishop on b5 away and get the pawn on c4. So they have to play d5. But what happens if they play like such a logical move, queen e2? I recently had a blitz game where my opponent played queen e2, threatening d5. So obvious he wants to play d5 and to win my bishop, thanks to, actually due to bad king on e8. I played c6, kicking this bishop away. Bishop a4 check, threatening bishop with a tempi. And when they played knight c3, I played bishop e4. Believe it or not, white is already winning because they can't stop bishop takes c3 followed by queen takes a4, or bishop c3, queen c3, and taking the rook on a1. In a word, white is fallen apart here. So after bishop e6, queen e2 loses, so they have to play d5. This is exactly what we want. So when the bishop f5, knight c3, and bishop c5. Black bishops make an impressive duo with their control of both of these diagonals, h7, b1, and a7, g1. This gives us a great amount of compensation and a very rich play afterwards, a rich play of minor pieces. I also have to tell you that there is a lot of difficulties for this king on e1, so we might seriously start thinking how to attack the king on e1 afterwards. Queen e2. Here, Smerdon in his book says even queen e7 could be good. I believe king f8 is, just like I said in a previous video, in the spirit of this gambit and opening. Maybe we just put the king out of a natural castle short and natural square, but basically we've just opened up e8 square, so at some point we can actually try to reach with a rook and try to play rook e8 afterwards. g4, and I found so many games in base played like this, also in couple of blitz games and bullet games my opponents went for this seemingly logical move, but actually they're lost in couple of moves. After knight g4, f takes g4, queen h4, bishop takes g4, and position is practically collapsing. We've seen this game in Manila 2008 between international master Goch and Lila. Laila, who's a good representative of this opening with the black pieces, and he was winning, just like you see, with the black pieces already in 13 moves. An impressive opening with black, and that's why I actually like this opening so much. Anyways, we've seen this is quite an interesting game, and I don't want to spend too much time analyzing variations where they go after f3, bishop f5, and bishop e5. I just want to tell you one more time that after knight bd7, c4, and e6 were considered to be absolutely fine. They can't let us take on d5, because then we would equalize material balance on the board and get a nice game. And that's why I'm telling you that they have to take on e6, bishop captures, you threaten c6, and this is actually what we dream of. Two great bishops, control of these diagonals and squares, and black has an amazing play of minor pieces. Apart from this variation with bishop e5, there is also probably most challenging approach by white, g4. I certainly, if I played in tournament, in blitz, in bullets, rapid games as well, I would certainly like to face this one the most, because g4 weakens the dark squares around the king on e1, weakens the pawn structure, creates unnecessary weaknesses in white's camp, and I already played like a bunch of games there, and my results are fantastic. So bishop g6, c4, and here once again we break in the center with e6. I just have to tell you one more thing, that c6 could be quite an interesting approach by black and becomes more and more popular. In computer championships, Stockfish played this move and I believe drew the game. Although after checking thoroughly both lines, in my opinion, e6 should definitely be trickier. So you should be going with e6. They play knight c3 and you take on d5. I remember when I played Blood's game against Nigel Short once, I actually got crushed that game, and Nigel Short didn't play computer move. Computer move is g5. Short played some knight h3 followed by knight f4 and h4 afterwards. I got crushed because he played knight h3, I did something, he played knight f4, challenged me to take on c4, that's what I did, he took by bishop, took on g6 afterwards, and demolished me on the king side. Although it's not such a big problem, because on knight h3 you should be playing knight c6 and to take on c4, attacking the white center. That's why g5 looks a very interesting approach by white. I just have to tell you, it's like a double-edged approach by white, and certainly not to be one that I should be looking at in, for example, tournament chess. It, just like I told you, strictly computer approach, and involves a lot of risk. Even though computer would say white is winning, white is much better in most of these positions, in practice it doesn't work this way. So after g5 we go with knight h5 or knight f to d7. Knight h5 was covered in Smerdan's book. I just have to say it's nice line. It kind of takes control of the dark squares on the king's side, gives up the pawn on d5, which by the way cannot be even taken, because after knight c6, f4 with the idea f5 to win the piece, beautiful move knight e7, which offers a great compensation for black, because you don't have to worry about losing piece here, you just care about a very weak position of this king. So you can take a look at this position afterwards at home, and you'll realize that in most of these positions white even suffers. Knight e7 I can take by bishop, I can take and when f5 taking, and after queen h5 for example, knight e7, bishop s7, f5, the most forcing line, you just take on d4 and all of a sudden look at this king, look at our bishops, I can make short, long castle. I kind of felt this white's position as devastated already. So that's why after knight h5, you just have to carry on in computer fashion with f4. Those who play f4, they want to sooner or later threaten f5, or they want to play bishop e2 going after this knight on h5. So you play with knight c6. Just like I told you, you have to threaten in the center. This is what covered in most of books and articles. By the way, you can play bishop e4. That's my move. Because in case of f5, bishop f5, queen h5, short castle gives a great amount of compensation. Again, with this great bishops possibility, rook e8, knight c6, once again fight on the center, and mainly against this possibly weak king. So after bishop e4, they go queen e2 check, and we play bishop e4. This is what I analyzed. Interesting, just to, for example, be close to a very equal game is this queenless type of middle game, where you take by bishop. Knight takes d5 doesn't work because of bishop d6, and now bishop e4 is threatened. So after king f2, you just play c6, taking everything and getting a good position, or if they play c5, you just have this bishop e4 to win the piece immediately. So queen e7 is interesting possibility after queen e2 check, but still, just like we said, the real sense of this gambit should be with bishop e4, bishop g2, queen e7, knight f3, knight c6, castles, and g6. This g6 is here to maintain this knight on h5, to defend it, to maybe have knight g7, knight f5 afterwards, after the d4 pawn, to have like good control of the light squares, but in some lines like rook e1, castle, c takes d5, to go with bishop f3, and in case they take, to be able to get this f5 square with this knight, with perfectly fine type of middle game for black, because all these pawns by white are just broken. So I'm not going to go deeper than this into the knight h5 line. I'm just gonna tell you that it's interesting, gives black more than good compensation, and in practical chess, great chances to play on a win. Although I prefer knight after d7. I found some games played in freestyle chess. By the way, for if you don't know what is freestyle chess, is that type of chess where you can use everything. Help of GMs, coaches, friends, computers, books, anything. So that's why I actually believe freestyle chess is absolutely the highest quality of chess that can happen. And I found like a couple of games there with knight after d7. So after knight takes d5, knight c6. This gives black at least a reasonable compensation, like I previously said. And here I constantly keep saying reasonable compensation and compensation. Why? Because you're down material all the time. But we have active minor pieces. They have weak pawn structure. They mainly have exposed king on e1. They have kind of disharmony of their pieces afterwards. So that's why I think black should be happy with this type of an opening. After, for example, they go with h4, we should be going with knight b6. It's a nice position, can be played like this, and it's tiny better for white. If they play knight e2, which seems to be like very logical because it covers kind of this king on e1 and it controls this d4 square, you play knight b6. They play knight e3, you take this knight, and now you play knight e7. This knight e7 idea turns out to be one of the crucial ideas in this opening. We remove this knight. They're not supposed to take it because bishop takes on e7, threatens pawn, threatens check, wanna go with short castle, and very fast break of the white's position. So after knight e3, knight c6, we can make a draw, for example. But you can also play moves like h6, knight f5, or whatever. After knight c6, if they don't want to make a draw, but they want to push, you just play queen takes g5. I especially like this line. Rook goes to d8, check, because, by the way, queen was threatened by this bishop on c1. Check, and here we go with this beautiful move, bishop b4, with a great compensation for black. all things considered, this variation with and this computer approach with this hyper aggressive pawn pushing by white with g4, c4, and here knight c3 and g5 should be good for black in practice. According to the engines will always give white very big advantage. But don't forget, you just play against humans, and humans are way worse in defending. Also, they have, whenever you do something tricky, speaking of the human beings, we're actually showing kind of human reaction to defend, to protect the king, even though computers play that cold-blooded and they just kill you. So this is a high suggestion for you to play. Whether you go for knight h5 or knight f to d7 in this line, it should be considered to be great for black. And finally, there is a line c4. I'm very excited to show you Magnus Carlsen's game and how he threatened this variation and line in practice in the past. This game was played in Chess.com Pro League back to 2018, and it was a beautiful win. Even though Carlsen missed one killer move, his game was killer's game by itself, and I really enjoyed the game that is following. So after c4, we once again played this e6 move. After this great move, believe it or not, black scoring practice is extremely impressive. They don't have to actually take. g4 would just transpose into something that is good for us. If they play like knight c3, we just take, and after g4, we once again can transpose into the line that we analyzed with bishop g6, but you can also play this very promising type of improvement with the bishop e6, where you just hold the d5 square. So here g4 turns out to be even worse order moves. If they go with g4 straight away, that's fortunately and hopefully what people will do against you, and then you play and knight g4, come up with this queen h4 check. In case of this, you have a well-known tactics. Pause the video and find it. Bishop takes f3, queen h5, and take the queen on d1. And there is also a line with king d2, bishop e4, knight f3, and queen f2. Just like I previously told you, in most of these positions, it's so easy for white to fall apart. All things considered, by the way, one last thing. Those who play queen b3 because it's kind of obvious and logical move in many similar type of positions, here it doesn't seem to be working because you just take on d5, and when they take, you play knight bd7. Here, once again, for the sake of one pawn, we get like full activity. In case they stop this bishop, we play bishop takes c5. What a beautiful move. Rook b8, play short castle, go with queen e7, and play knight c5. This variation has just shown you that all we want to have in this type of games is a piece activity, open files, and lots of tactics. That's why I actually enjoy this variation so much, and this is one of my favorite positions in the whole Portuguese, Scandinavian Portuguese for black. After e6, eventually they just have to play d takes e6. We go with knight c6, and this is kind of bizarre reaction by black. You threaten pawn on d4, you keep developing your pieces while your opponent just keeps playing with his pawns. This is position that inspired lots of club players to take up the Portuguese. Engines also give us good compensation, and furthermore, black has a tremendous score in practical play. So they have to take on f7, play d5, or play bishop e3. Those who play d5 here, and there are not like such a small amount of players who do that. You play knight b4, threatening knight c2. They have to play knight e3, and you take on e6. Black is already clearly better. In one of the game of Smerdon, bishop d2, he captured on d5, played bishop d7, queen e7 to defend the knight and destabilize position of the king, came up with check, and after d4 in 14 moves, another easy win with the Portuguese, Scandinavian Portuguese. And finally, if they play e takes f7, we'll analyze Carlsen's game, but let me just show you what in most of these books, articles, and magazines, all these authors actually consider the best move for white, bishop e3. I don't think it's necessarily that good for white. So after bishop e3, queen e7, we just go with, if they play knight c3, you just go long castle. That's the point of queen e7. You have a great compensation. They can't touch the f7 pawn because bishop on e3 altogether with this king, they're weak. And this is a great initiative. One game went like queen d2, knight b4, threatening this check. Long castles, queen e6, a3, knight c2 threatened, and knight a1. If you remember my first lecture ever here on the Butcher channel, I made a similar combination with the knight a1, knight b3, winning, either mating my opponent or winning the queen. So after bishop e3, you play queen e7, e takes f7, king f7. I just want to give you one important explanation. Don't ever be afraid to put your king on f7 like this, because you make like kind of castle at hand, and of course it gives you rook e8, afterwards bishop b4. Actually, you're happy to put your king on e8 because you just move your queen somewhere, play bishop b4, put your rook on from h8 on e8, and that is gonna be a great thing. For example, in this game was king f2, rook e8, queen d2, and queen d7. It's a key move because it threatens bishop f8, rook f8, and king g8. For example, that kind of artificial castle. So when they play knight c3, stop the video and find tactics for black. Rook takes e3. I'm showing you a game played in the Netherlands back to 1997. Queen cannot take, because if queen takes, then you just take on d4, play bishop c5, and play rook e8 afterwards, with terrible position for white. King took on e3, played g6. Actually, that game was bishop c5, which looks so nice, tempting, and but it's not enough. Because after he captured rook e8, he came up with d takes e5, knight g4, and after king e2, rook e8, but position was complicated. Eventually black managed to win, but better move was g6, threatening bishop h6, and after this taking on d4. You threaten knight c2, you threaten bishop c5, you threaten rook e8 afterwards. Black looks fantastic. All things considered, mostly in all these games, white just goes with e takes f7, king takes f7, and this is another proof that this variation, even though the king looks at first glance weak, but then if you just go deeper into the secrets of this opening, you will just realize it's actually a great position for the king. You threaten bishop b4 with a tempi, followed by rook e8. Here, Carlsen's opponent played bishop e3. By the way, his opponent was GM Vaibhav Suri from India. Strong GM, almost 2600, but he badly got crushed in 20 moves. After like king f7, bishop e3 is one option, but let me just show you what happens after what, for example, everybody claims to be the only reasonable continuation here in order to defend. Not enough. You play knight b4, threatening both knight d3 and knight c2. When they play like knight g3, you can play knight c2, knight d4, so you can play like knight c2, knight d4 with a great compensation and initiative. You can play bishop c2, and after queen d2, this beautiful move, sacking the bishop in order to play rook e8. And if bishop e2, knight d3, check, and queen d4, they literally can't stop the checkmate and they're lost. Or they just have to give up queen. And finally, if they play king f2, you go knight d3 and you win the queen like this. Even though computer says it's around equal, in practice I prefer black's game after this, because this looks with mutual chances, but as long as we have queen on the board, especially faster time controls, I guess it's good for all of you. And after king f7, bishop e3, bishop b4. Do you know what's like the latest news here? After 7th move, actually after 8th move, bishop b4, black is winning. So let me just show you what's happening here. In a couple of games, I found that people played king f2, rook e8, and they just go with knight e2, for example. Everything looks defendable in white's position, unless we go with this sacrifice, rook takes e3. This is the first time, actually second time, that I'm showing you this rook e3 sacrifice. I just want to point out one thing. Definitely, just like in the dragon, you have a typical exchange sack on c3. In these positions, rook takes c3 looks like one of the most typical type of sacrifices. So you should be getting used to this by now. So after like a3, rook takes c3, once again, this will never miss a chance. If a takes b4, what a beautiful move, because you can take, queen takes d4, and once again, you just use a fantastic tactics. King e3, you just go queen e7, rook e8 threatening mate. In the game, bishop e2 is the only move. After g3, this one, bishop e1. This is game Onik Ver against Merden, played back to 2013, and he actually published out this game in his book. I'm a big fan of this one because I especially like the finish of this game. For example, if knight h3, knight e4, knight c3, knight f4, and knight h4 with devastating attack and almost mate there. So all these games are just great examples to show you like how great tactical possibilities black can go for here. Bishop b4 is a great move. Knight c3 should be the best, but it's still is losing. Rook e8, we now threaten. By the way, if they play queen d2, of course you play queen d4, and they're just falling apart. They have to play king f2, and do I have to stop the video and ask you what should be the move for black? So once again, just like in the dragon, black goes for typical exchange sack on c3. Here you go with this exchange sack on a3. It's a standard sacrifice, and it always works perfectly fine for black in practice. After king e3, surprisingly, Carlsen here didn't go with the best move. Best move is bishop c2. Best move is bishop c2. You just want to force this queen to move away. If the queen takes, queen d4, king e2, and a rook e8 checkmate. So that's a typical trick. But believe it or not, this awesome piece sack, even though it's a refutation of the whole line, was missed by Carlsen. But I guess he wanted to break position of the king immediately, because if queen d4, king e7, if this one rook d8 is another way of picking up the queen, because knight d5 is impossible to be done because all these pieces are just tied up. And after king f2, Carlsen played bishop c5. Vibe have played this move, and probably he missed bishop c2 or whatever, but his position is like terrible. He captured c5. Carlsen played queen e7 and played rook e8 threatening mate in case of rook d4 with queen e1. So this guy played bishop d3. Carlsen went with queen e3, kicked this knight away with a tempi, captured, played c5, maintaining the knight in the center and preparing for another exchange sack on e4. That's what he did. Played here, check, queen c2, and after b takes c5, since this guy couldn't develop this knight because of checkmate, he simply had to resign in this set position.